One sat behind a desk in the Kremlin and signed death warrants for millions of his own citizens. The other sat behind a desk in occupied Manchuria and signed orders that infected entire Chinese villages with plague. Neither one ever killed a human being with his own hands. Both killed more human beings than any private citizen of the 20th century. Both turned the modern bureaucracy into the most efficient murder weapon in human history. Tonight, Joseph Stalin against Shirō Ishii. The tyrant against the surgeon. Round of 16, match 3. Joseph Stalin arrives in this round as the champion of episode 20, the round 1 finale, where he defeated Adolf Hitler by every measure of ideological reach, length of rule, and historical rehabilitation. Shirō Ishii arrives as the champion of episode 18, where he defeated Josef Mengele by orders of magnitude in deployed body count and scientific reach. Tonight, the man who weaponized famine against the man who weaponized disease. One question: who killed more efficiently from a desk? Welcome back to Evil vs. Evil, Monsters of History. The Tournament of Champions continues. This is episode 27. Born in Gori, in the Georgian region of the Russian Empire, in 1878, Iosif Vissarionovich Tsugashvili was the third son of a poor Georgian cobbler and his devoutly religious wife. His two older brothers had died in infancy. Iosif was small, sickly, smallpox-scarred, and physically deformed. His left arm never grew properly. His father was a vicious alcoholic who beat him so severely that as an adult, he reportedly never let anyone touch his back. He was a brilliant student. He excelled at the Tiflis Theological Seminary, where he was being trained to become a Russian Orthodox priest. There, instead, he discovered Marx. He was expelled in 1899. He took the name Stalin, meaning man of steel. He spent the next 18 years robbing banks, organizing strikes, evading the Tsarist secret police, and serving multiple stints in Siberian exile. When the Russian Revolution came in 1917, Stalin was a minor figure inside the Bolshevik leadership. Lenin took him on as an enforcer. He was appointed General Secretary of the Communist Party in 1922, a position considered so administratively boring that no one else wanted it. Within 6 years, he had used that secretarial position to control every party appointment in the Soviet Union and to outmaneuver every rival. By 1929, Stalin was the unchallenged ruler of the Soviet Union. The forced collectivization of agriculture between 1929 and 1933 killed an estimated 5 to 8 million peasants. The Ukrainian famine of 1932 and 1933, the Holodomor, was a deliberately engineered starvation that killed another 3 to 7 million Ukrainians. The Great Purge of 1936 through 1938 saw between 700,000 and 1.2 million Soviet citizens executed, often after public show trials. The Gulag system imprisoned tens of millions, of whom at least 1.5 million died in the camps. Stalin signed a non-aggression pact with Hitler in August 1939. The pact lasted 22 months. On June 22, 1941, Hitler invaded the Soviet Union with the largest invasion force in history. Stalin, blindsided, suffered an apparent nervous breakdown for several days before recovering and leading the Soviet Union through what Russians still call the Great Patriotic War. The Soviet Union lost 27 million people in that war, more than any other nation. He continued to purge his own population for another 8 years after victory. He died on March 5, 1953, of a massive cerebral hemorrhage at his dacha outside Moscow. His own bodyguards left him lying on the floor for hours, too afraid to enter the room. That was Joseph Stalin, the seminarian who became the most successful political killer in human history. Born in Chiyoda-mura, Japan, in 1892, Shirō Ishii was the fourth son of a relatively prosperous landowning family in Chiba Prefecture, 80 miles east of Tokyo. He was a brilliant, ambitious, eccentric boy who slept only 4 hours a night, took cold baths in winter, and refused most ordinary food. He worshipped his ancestors. He worshipped the emperor. He believed Japan was destined to rule Asia. He studied medicine at Kyoto Imperial University and joined the Imperial Japanese Army Medical Corps. He earned a doctorate in microbiology in 1927 and spent 2 years traveling abroad, studying public health programs in over 20 countries. He returned to Japan convinced of one thing: Japan needed its own biological weapons program. He was given one. In 1936, with the personal authorization of Emperor Hirohito, Ishii was sent to occupied Manchuria to establish a secret military research compound at Pingfang, near Harbin. It was officially called the Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department of the Kwantung Army. It was, in reality, the largest biological warfare program in human history. It was known by its postal code, Unit 731. For 9 years, Unit 731 conducted experiments on at least 3,000 human prisoners. The prisoners were referred to as Maruta, meaning logs, because the official cover story was that the facility was a lumber mill. The experiments included vivisection without anesthesia, performed by hand on conscious subjects, frostbite experiments, pressure chambers. Pregnant women were dissected to study the fetus inside. Children were infected with plague, anthrax, cholera, and syphilis. But Unit 731's true purpose was field deployment. Ishii's program developed and used biological weapons against Chinese civilians on a massive scale. Plague-infected fleas were dropped from planes over Chinese cities. Cholera was introduced into water supplies. Anthrax bombs were tested on villages. Estimates of the dead from Unit 731's deployed biological warfare range from 200,000 to over 300,000 Chinese civilians. When Japan surrendered in 1945, Ishii ordered the entire Pingfang compound destroyed. He returned to Japan and waited. American military intelligence, eager to obtain his research data before the Soviets, offered Ishii and his senior staff complete immunity from prosecution in exchange for full disclosure of their findings. He accepted. He spent the rest of his life as a free man in Japan, occasionally lecturing at medical schools, occasionally consulting for the United States military. He died of throat cancer on October 9th, 1959, in his own bed. That was Shirō Ishii, the general who weaponized disease and traded the evidence for his freedom. Now let us put these two desk killers side by side in the round of 16. Category 1, body count. Stalin is responsible for between 15 million and 25 million direct deaths from purges, famines, deportations, and the Gulag. Ishii is responsible for approximately 3,000 experimental deaths, and somewhere between 200,000 and 300,000 civilian deaths from deployed. Biological warfare. The edge is Stalin, by 2 orders of magnitude. Category 2. Bureaucratic infrastructure. Stalin built the NKVD, the Gulag system, the 5-year plans, and the show trial apparatus, infrastructure that ran the largest state in human history for 29 years. Ishii built a single research compound with 3,000 staff and a deployment system that operated for 9 years. The edge in scale is Stalin. The edge in scientific specificity is Ishii. Category 3. Reach. Stalin's terror operated across 1/6 of the Earth's landmass, from Berlin to the Bering Sea. Ishii's biological weapons were deployed across multiple Chinese provinces and tested as far away as the Philippines. Stalin's reach was continental. Ishii's reach was regional. The edge is Stalin. Category 4. capacity for greater damage. This is the tournament category. Stalin died at the absolute ceiling of his power, having ruled for nearly 30 years and accumulated nuclear weapons. He could not have killed more without provoking direct nuclear war with the United States. Ishii died at a small fraction of his ceiling. Had Japan won the war, his Unit 731 program would have been scaled up to industrial dimensions. He had already designed delivery systems for weaponized plague targeting entire American cities. Estimates of potential casualties from a Japanese biological strike on the west coast of the United States ran into the millions. The edge in unrealized capacity, surprisingly, is Ishii. Category 5. Long-term influence. Stalin shaped Soviet communism and the entire Cold War. His model was studied by every 20th century communist leader. Ishii's research data, handed to the United States military, quietly influenced American biological weapons research for decades and possibly seeded much of the modern field of bioethics in reverse. The edge in scale of influence is Stalin. The edge in scientific influence per body buried is Ishii. So the categories split 3-2 in favor of Stalin. But categories do not capture everything. Here is the wild card. What if Ishii had been given the Soviet apparatus? With Stalin's resources, he could have run biological warfare research across all 11 time zones, targeted every internal enemy of the Soviet state with weaponized pathogens, and produced casualties comparable to Stalin's own. He had the scientific patience Stalin lacked. Now what if Stalin had been given Unit 731 as his only weapon? He would not have known what to do with it. He needed the apparatus of the state, the secret police, the propaganda machine. A single biological lab would not have satisfied him. Each man was the tool his country gave him. Strip the country, and the man's reach collapses. The verdict. Joseph Stalin advances. Shirō Ishii is eliminated from the bracket. The decision comes down to actualized scale. Ishii had the scientific imagination of a much larger killer, but he never had the platform. Stalin had both. In a tournament designed to find the most dangerous human being who has ever lived, the dictator who buried 20 million people beats the general who buried 300,000 every single time. But here is the part that should disturb you. Stalin is, in modern Russia, undergoing a strange and ongoing political rehabilitation. His face appears in public polls as one of the most admired figures in Russian history. Ishii died unprosecuted, his crimes buried in classified American files for decades, his name unknown to most of the global public even today. Both men killed at scales that should have ended their reputations forever. Both men got something close to historical respectability instead. Stalin was the tyrant. Ishii was the surgeon. Joseph Stalin moves on to the quarterfinals. Shirō Ishii is eliminated from the Tournament of Champions. Next episode, Emperor Hirohito against Niccolo Machiavelli, the God Emperor who never lifted a hand against his own people, against the philosopher who taught every tyrant how to do it. Round of 16, Match 4.